Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next episode of Big Data Talks, in which we have conversations with industry experts about the way in which big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are changing the way we live. My name is Jan-Willem, and I will be your host today. I'm the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, which is hosting this series of podcasts. You can always watch back the recording and discussion on YouTube, the Big Data Framework website, and the podcasting platform on Apple. Today, I have the great pleasure to welcome Dr. Poo Kuan Hoong, better known as KH. Dr. Poo works as a lead data scientist at British American Tobacco, where he applies his combination of research and industrial experience in big data analytics, data mining, machine learning, and AI. I've been following KH for quite a while online, and I'm extremely pleased to have him with me on the show today. KH has over 15 years of academic and research experience and is a passionate practitioner in the art of data science, machine learning, and AI. A graduate of Nagoya Institute of Technology, Dr. Poo holds a doctorate in computer science, a master in information technology, and a bachelor from UKM. Besides that, Dr. Poo also serves as a mentor in the NASA International Spaceship Apps Challenge. He's a founder of the Malaysia R user group and TensorFlow and Deep Learning Malaysia groups. He also provides consultancy and a variety of other sectors within finance, telecommunications, and technology startups. So it's quite a bio. I'm super pleased to have you with us here today. Welcome so much, KH, to Big Data Talks.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be at the other side of the podcast. So normally I interview people, and now I think that it's super fun to be at the other side of the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been following you for quite a while and also listened to some of your own podcast episodes. So can you tell us a little bit around that and what kind of work you do besides all of your day-to-day job in order to promote the community?
Sure. Let me do a shameless self-plug of my own podcast. So I during the COVID, so it was quite lonely just working from home. And then because I was also very passionate about running communities in Malaysia, like you said, I founded the Malaysia R user group and also the TensorFlow Deep Learning Malaysia group. So because of the COVID lockdown, so I find that we are so isolated, and I'm not doing any communities event. So I thought that maybe I can start a podcast, so I can actually connect people, practitioners in the industry, and still, find out from them what they are doing, and then also help the communities to actually spread out the great work they are doing in the industry. So my podcast is called AI, ML, and Data Science Talk Podcast. So it's available via all the platform out there, Apple, Spotify, and Google. So basically, I just talked who are the practitioner industry, basically like what do they do, and then if they're going to recruit people, what are the skill set they're looking for. So that's kind of stuff that I think might be interested to many people. And also, I find it interesting that to talk to people during that lockdown period, during COVID.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. What I noticed when I started with this podcast is actually an opportunity to learn more yourself. And because you have an opportunity to, for an hour, go a little bit more in depth with people who are experts in their field. So what I really like about it is that I get to meet different people from all over the planet that always have a very fascinating story to share. So yeah. Thank you so much for that part of a shameless self-promotion. We will put the link to your podcast downstairs into the comments as well. So I encourage everyone who's listening today to check that out as well. So what we always do in this series is trying to dive a little bit deeper and start with understanding how all these new technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence, are changing the way we live. If I want to introduce a little bit of your own personal journey and how you became to where you are today, a leading voice in the data science community, what have been your steps to arrive at where you are today?
Sure. So I think around 2015, where Malaysia started the interest in big data and data science. So around that time, the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, which is MDEC, so they actually started a course which is called MyProCert. So they actually offer data science specialization to the public, which they actually use the Coursera John Hopkins specialization. And that course is actually it actually uses the one of the two programming language commonly used by data scientists, which is R. So at that time, I kind of like just started picking up R language on the self-interest. And then when this program come in, I actually helped with my fellow colleagues from MMU, multi-universities. We actually helped the MDEP program to actually like tutor the people who actually sign up for that course. So from there, I find that while helping the public with this MDEC course, myself actually have deeper interest in this area related to data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So after the course finished around 2016, I decided that maybe also due to my midlife crisis, I was like, okay, after 15 years working in academics, maybe I should do something different in my life. Instead of doing a lot of theory, I also like to see that I would like to apply the knowledge that I have in the industry. So I left academics. I actually joined in the industry. My first job after I left academics was I joined Nielsen. Nielsen, one of the big data survey company out there. So from there, I actually moved on to work in Axiata, one of the subsidiary, which is Axiata Digital Advertising, where we deal a lot with digital advertising data. And then from there, I actually moved on to where I am now, which is with BAT, working as a lead data scientist. So in BAT, I work in a department called RGM, Revenue Growth Management. So in revenue growth management, what do? Is we apply analytics in, we have a big data analytics team. We apply analytics in all our business in BAT to see how we can actually help the people to make better decisions and also help the company to drive revenue through analytics. So I think that's my journey from academics all the way to the industry.
Very, very interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that Johns Hopkins course with R, because that is actually one that I took myself many, many years ago as well. And it was also one of my first entries into the world of data science with that specific exercises, which were indeed, if I remember correctly, all in R at the time. So while I was preparing for this interview, I also saw that besides the communities that you founded, you're very, very active in the Google space. Is that correct?
Yeah. So long before like I said, I'm very passionate about communities. So when I was running the R user group, and then I started to notice that there is also a big interest in AI, especially the upcoming deep learning framework, which is called TensorFlow. So I actually went to an event in Korea, which is sponsored by Microsoft then, where Microsoft actually invited quite a number of communities leaders around the region. So one of the communities that I noticed was a deep learning TensorFlow group in Singapore. So kind of like, in Malaysia, we call it kiasu, means afraid to lose. So after I saw that, how come Singapore can have these communities that Malaysia don't have? So right after I came back from Korea, I founded the TensorFlow Deep Learning user group. So the idea is also just like the R user group is to actually spread the awareness of deep learning in Malaysia, and also try to form the communities and then do more events, knowledge sharing. I find that in Malaysia itself, we have a lot of practitioners out there where they're quietly doing their own things, which they are quite good at it, but they need a proper community to connect them together. It also benefit the new joiner, the newbies, the beginners, because they can actually see that if they're interested in this field, they can actually see that there are people actually working in this field, and they can actually find out more actually what do they do, what kind of skill set they actually apply, and then what kind of latest technology they apply. So by forming these communities, with the intention of building this network, I got noticed by Google. So Google, they have a program called Google Developer Expert. So in Google Developer Expert is they actually try to gather those community leaders and then give them recognition. And then whenever there's any event, whatever, this Google developer expert will be invited to go and do knowledge sharing, and also again connect to the others, communities, event organizer, and also spread the knowledge about all these latest technology. Not necessarily related to Google, but of course, because some of the event is organized by Google, we will also try to connect to some of the technologies, for example, TensorFlow, Keras, which is mainly championed by Google at this moment.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I'm going to talk about your work in those different user communities a little bit more in detail as we are progressing, because I think that that's a very fascinating part, especially when you're building a community. How do you kind of keep the people engaged? So that's definitely something that we're going to talk about soon. But before I do that, being part of these kinds of developer programs and seeing all the new things that are coming to the world and to companies, basically on the first row, what are some of the very interesting technologies that we need to start thinking about?
Yep. So I think everybody now is on the bandwagon of this large language model, especially with the introduction of ChatGPT, like November last year. So I think in the span of 8 months, we have seen tremendous growth in this area. And then people are applying all these technologies and try to apply all these technologies in different areas. So I think definitely we will see a more application coming up with the utilization of this large language model. Sometimes also can be called now as a foundation model, because now all these models are multi-model trained. They are not just focusing, like, for example, large language model, you just focus on text. But in the coming, like, for example, GPT-4 is actually a multi-model kind of framework where you just don't just focus on the text. All these models now have been trained with images, have been trained with audio, have been trained with text. So you have one foundation model where user can just interact with a very common natural language way, which is what we call NLP. And then you can actually ask this model to actually generate more data point for you, whether it's in form of text, images, or video, whatever. So definitely that space is definitely very interesting, that you can see there more growth coming in. Another area that I'm quite interested in is in the form of federated learning. So we know what is federated learning. Basically, federated learning is where individual machine can actually train without sharing data with other machine learning model. So I think in terms of privacy, this is very important. So we do not want our data to be shared. So one way to approach this is what we call federated learning. I think this is something that if we can maintain this progress in this area, that is something that we will definitely will be anticipated in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a wide audience listening, from very young and very, I would say, new to the domain of data science towards very, very experienced. Since federated learning is kind of a new term, could you explain in very simple words what it is to people who might not be familiar with what it is?
Okay, so federated learning basically, okay, because now most of the time we are very concerned about privacy. So for example, when we are talking about, we know that to better understand, to better provide a result, we need to have a proper data learn that in our machine learning model. So in a federated learning, basically is a machine learning technique where you actually allow multiple devices to train a machine learning model without sharing the data. So the data is still kept at the individual machine, and then it's not shared across all the other devices. So this is very useful, especially when you have application where data is very sensitive, or where the user do not want to share the data. So as time progresses and people are better aware of their data privacy, people are more concerned about their data being shared across devices. So we can actually build a better machine learning model with more data, but the data is still kept and it's not shared across the platform. So
do you think that this is going to
federated learning.
Do you think that this is going to be an answer specifically to enterprise organizations? You work at a very large one yourself. Do you think that federated learning is going to be an answer to the privacy and data confidentiality issues that we see today?
Yes, definitely. Especially now, devices are getting more and more powerful, and then we have a lot of IoT devices that can actually also participate in all this training of machine learning model. And where you can actually, each individual devices can actually train with their own data, and then when you assemble or the result of this trained machine learning model, you can get a better result accuracy in the prediction. That is something I think you can actually look forward for if you in terms of maintaining a data privacy.
Yeah. So for large organizations that are considering to move towards these forms of federated learning in order to deal with these privacy issues, what would be the way to move into that? And what I mean with that is, how do you move from a more classic kind of training model towards a federated training and learning model?
So I'm not an expert, so I'm kind of like, I'm looking forward to this framework out there. But there are like even Google itself has been trying hard to actually come up with a better framework in this federal learning, where they can actually provide a better framework where people can start to train the machine learning model locally without sharing data. Because eventually you need to have some people champion that actually come up with a better framework, so this federal learning can be employed at different organization or even different entities that they can actually use this framework for federal learning.
Yeah, very interesting. So that's one of the main new technology. I kind of want to pick on that immediately, because that is a term that you see coming up more and more. But the other major one that you mentioned is obviously large language model. There is not anybody in the world, I would say, at this moment that isn't talking about that. So let me start with a question of conscience or preference: ChatGPT or BART?
This is like a question that people always ask: Python or R. Isn't it? So to me,
Correct.
both has its weaknesses and strength. Of course, eventually, what you want to look for is how is this tools is connected with the bigger ecosystem.
Yeah.
That's more important. So one thing about BART is because the company behind is Google, and Google now can actually connect the BART with its Google ecosystem, where you can actually start to see now Google are offering more and more services on top of BART. Even now, Google has just launched something what we call Duet AI. Duet AI is basically similar to GitHub Copilot, where you actually help in the programming. So now you can actually see that a lot of these tools, the strength that can offer is how well these two are connected with the bigger ecosystem, and then you can actually see the benefit from it.
Yeah. So that integration within more, I would say, enterprise applications is, I would say, definitely something that sets apart. There's obviously been a lot of buzz around Microsoft being involved on ChatGPT. On the other hand, do you think it's going to be a competition between those two platforms, or do we
I
need to
think
take note of something else?
Yeah, I think Microsoft did good. It's actually take a very good bet on investing into OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. We can see that recently ChatGPT itself has been integrated with a lot of Microsoft products. And then you can see that more and more products that, for example, now you can usually use ChatGPT in Bing, and then you can usually see also there's a Bing ChatGPT inside the Edge browser.
Mm-hmm.
And also now you can see that slowly ChatGPT also integrated with a lot of Microsoft Office products. In Microsoft Teams, you can see with all this auto reply that or auto generate text for you. So I think that is a benefit where you can see a simple large language model that any company can train, but how well you integrate this product or this service with a bigger ecosystem, then you can see the benefit from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you rightfully mentioned, large language models have been getting a lot of buzz. There's a lot of attention around it. It's safe to say that in every conference I've been in at the last half year, there's not a single speaker who doesn't reference or mention it at least twice in a presentation. But you also start to see now some resistance. And this week, I read an article in the New York Times that basically claimed or stated that in order to maintain their own intellectual property, they have closed down their website for the bots so that the information that is on the New York Times website can no longer be used or scraped or crawled, whatever you want to call it, in training large language models. And it's definitely not the first and only company that's going to do this. So you will start to see that a number of sources which we consider reliable or reliable content is going to shut their doors for these kinds of spiders. And a lot of news sources which we deem more unreliable or not so much fact-checked, if I can say that, will still allow it. Is that going to be a major risk for large language models, in your opinion?
Yep. So, yeah, I think with large language model, people, all this while people realize that data is very valuable. It's one of the biggest assets out there. But now with all this large language model, that is always hungry for data to be trained and to get it updated. People see that whatever data that I have now, I should own my data. And then if you want to use my data to train your model, I should be paid for it. So I think that's one way to look at it. That's why I see. I think that's where even like Twitter or X now, they are closing up their API. They do not allow people to actually scrap the data. Even platform like Reddit was also trying to do that, because eventually all these large language model, it need to progress, because you need to get up the latest data to update itself, because then it will be just stagnant, and then the answer generator will not be factually correct because it's not updated. So that's one way to look at it eventually, because all these companies that are producing large language model, they are monetizing their services, but they are not paying for the data provider where they actually scrap the data. So we understand that where this is coming from. I mean, if you look at from all this data that being scrapped, of course, I would want my data to be paid. If you want to use my data to train your model, where eventually the product that you are going to use my data is you are going to sell this service. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is we come to a point that we need to have a proper regulation on this all this large language model or all this AI. I think because eventually who owns the data, the copyright of the data. For example, now we have all these tools like Google, GitHub Copilot, and recently Meta also launched Code Llama, and then Google also has its own code generator. So if there is a code generated being trained from code that is scrapped from the internet, who owns the copyright of the data being generated by all these tools? So there is we come to a tipping point where we need to consider that there needs some sort of a proper way to regulate all these tools or all these AI tools now, or whether it's a copyright or whether it's what happens if the result generated by all these tools is not factually correct, if it's misleading, who's going to be responsible if the result given is not correct.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of discussion we need to it's because all these tools that we have now is still very new and it's very popular, but we come to a stage now we need to think about what are the consequences and what are the regulations that we need for to regulate all these things that we have now.
You're touching upon a very contentious topic and something that is being debated, I think, basically all across the world right now. From what you've seen in your own experience and with your knowledge around how governments move, are we ever going to find a universal consensus around who should own the data, who's going to need to be paid? and these kinds of questions, which are, I would say, very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think. If you
Not
have
the
read
time to
all
regret
this,
doing it.
if you have read all this report, even the founder of OpenAI, the CEO Sam Altman, he do agree that we come to a time now we need some sort of regulation, because there are people who are also afraid that all these machines going to be sentient. If we have no proper control now, what will happen if I mean, we are not to say I'm a doomsday kind of believer, but there are people who believe that or scared that one day what will happen if there's no one is controlling this machine and then the machine is taking over. So what are we what kind of regulation that we have now that to make sure the company who are training all these model are follow certain guideline or certain
Yeah.
regulation. I mean, long time ago when we talk about genetics, okay, we have rules for that. We do not allow people to simply edit genes, especially when it comes to human being.
Yeah.
We will penalize the company who actually do all these things. I think we come to a stage now we need to think about that in terms of AI also.
Yeah, absolutely. In one of my previous episodes, I had a speaker from IBM based in Australia, and he said, "Well, maybe we're at a point where this is no longer just, I would say, a government responsibility. It's also up to individual companies to take their own responsibility in the way that this is going to be used, the way that information is going to be procured, the way it's going to be operated. So how are we going to use it to sell products and services?" Now, you work in arguably one of the larger companies in the world. How does a large multinational deal with these kinds of problems? Because you're in the data science domain, I'm quite sure that these questions must have come up.
Yeah, I mean, for any multinational company, they have their own set of regulations that they have to follow to make sure they are compliance. So, but we have existing compliance at the guideline that we have, but in terms of all these AIs that is still very new.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of discussion, and nobody really sure how do we make sure that we are compliance, because there's no proper guideline at the moment. Like you
Yeah.
said, right? You said rightly said that, yeah, it's up to the individual companies, even up to maybe individual CEOs to make sure that they have a proper guideline for the company to follow. But how sure are you they will follow it? They could be a you can have a lot of guidelines, but if nobody following it, then there is also something can go wrong also easily. So maybe it come to a time that it should be also governments and agencies and regulation and all NGO should come together and come up with a proper guideline that every company can actually follow, or can refer to, and then they can tweak the guideline according to their company's the compliance or regulation that they have.
Yeah.
I think that's something that even we users should demand for it, because eventually all these tools or product will also affect us eventually.
Absolutely. So that same guest, his name is Kieran Hagen from IBM, said, well, every company should establish in the next year or 2 years something which is known as an AI ethics board. So some kind of body that is going to deal with the ethical decisions that come into play through all these kind of new technologies. Is that something that you would second and say that this is something that indeed every company should do, or is it too early for that?
Yeah, I think now is the time to think about it, because more and more of these tools is coming to I mean, all like Google or Microsoft, all these big companies, they are actually offering all these tools to the company now. It will come to a stage now. We should start thinking about it, especially at this moment where we are still at the early stage of adoption of all these tools.
Yeah.
If you have a proper guideline, of course, we can tweak the guideline as we go along. But definitely, this is the best time to think about all these guidelines or all these ethical, like you said, form of ethical board, and then think about all these guidelines that the company should follow.
Very, very interesting. So one of the main themes of this podcast is I already introduced it in the first few sentences. I always try to understand and use these conversations to try to see how big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence are changing the way we live. Do you already see from, I would say, your extracurricular activities or within your company that these large language models are changing the way people behave and operate within organizations?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Whenever there's a new breakthrough in the technology, okay, when the mass audience are excited about it,
Mhm.
that is the time where corporation will start to think that how do I utilize this technology in our business to actually, better service our customer and also better improve our efficiency in our company. Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely, especially with this ChatGPT, that the leaps of the progress that we have seen from previous all these NLP tools is definitely something that eye-opening. And then and it reached a stage that even the people on the street are talking about it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
my son has been using ChatGPT doing the homework. Even the common people are talking about it. Then there is like I said, the tipping point that okay, this technology is going to be utilized by almost everyone, and then it's time for any organization out there to think about how this technology also can be used in our corporation to better improve our efficiency or better serve our customer or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. I mean, the technology has progressed that fast, and definitely it has created a lot of excitement among all the other people, whether it's a normal user or even in a big organization.
Yeah. The thing that I always wonder, as you know, I work with a lot of larger organizations on these kinds of techniques and problems. And what I found is that most companies, in all honesty, already struggle with making, I would say, a simple predictive model. Just a very basic predictor or some kind of estimator that's going to predict stocks or prices or levels of inventory that they need to have. So if that's already such a challenge for most organizations, is not the step towards these even more advanced technologies one step too far for most organizations?
Yeah. So, uh, I think, yeah. So the problem is, sometimes the hype also can create the other side of the problem, where people kind of over expectation of the tools or the service that can provide. Especially when we talk about last time when we start into data science or big data or machine learning, a lot of people think that okay, now I have some data. Okay, with this data, I can ask anyone data scientist. I can employ some data scientists, and then the tools I can come up with tools, and then I can not all the tools can actually give me a very good prediction already, and then my business will grow very, very fast. Of course, as we know that any machine learning model out there, it always require a proper set of data and huge amount of data to be correct, and with the amount of data, then only you can improve the model and give you good result. So, but then a lot of people think that like I always joke is the boss will say, oh, I have a lot of data. Then you ask how much data that you have. Oh, I have 10,000 row Excel data, and to them 10,000 row Excel data is like a lot. So I mean that kind of mismatch of expectation. Similarly, like all these large language model now, yeah, large language model can do a lot of things. But of course, large language model also has its own flaw. For example, large language model can also give you inaccurate result. In the large language model term, we call it hallucination. So how do
That's
we
a good
deal with
way.
hallucination? How do we deal with hallucination? Of course, any product out there can give you result, especially now with all these large language models like ChatGPT or Bard. But sometimes the result is wrong, and then if the result is wrong, then there can be a bad consequences to especially to your to your customer.
Yeah.
So we should look at that the other side that this product is there, but we also have to do quite a number of work before this product can actually benefit us, and then we can actually make sure we guarantee that the product can actually deliver good result to our customers. So I mean, better understanding of the tool itself and then how to utilize these tools is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're not going to solve the challenges, but I think you're highlighting some of the key points that we see basically in every company that is trying to introduce these new technologies. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you around is all the community work that you've been doing, and especially in setting up user groups and getting people together to actively and proactively participate in data science problems. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit more on that because I know that a lot of people who are listening also either want to start communities, they want to get involved, but are typically too hesitant to take the first steps. So I wanted to learn a little bit from you when you started the our user group or the TensorFlow user groups here in Malaysia. What were the first steps that you took? That's the first part of my question. And the second part is, how do you get that group to grow to a significant number of people that it's actually going to be alive and worthwhile and contributing towards people that are in the group itself?
Sure. So again, community work is sometimes what I will say is a labor of love. Is something that you must be passionate about. So a lot of people see that he has a community, and then you see he has been given a Google developer expert kind of sponsored by Google to go and do more community events. He get to travel to places. You see he got to do this and that and that. But the back of this is there's a lot of time and resources that you need to contribute yourself to these committees that you're doing. So my advice is, if you're really passionate about communities, okay, you should know that there's a lot of hard work behind it. There's a lot of time that you need to sacrifice your time, even your weekend time, your personal time to actually run a communities. I see that a lot of people want to start a communities because they see that there's when you start communities, you kind of like become famous, but after a while the community just die now because the people behind the communities I'm busy now, I'm busy with my work. After a while the community just die down, which I think is very sad because when you run a communities, it's kind of like a job for you. It's like a full-time job for you actually, and then you must be passionate about it, and then you really know that there's going to be a lot of work behind, time and effort from your side behind it to make sure the communities keep on running. And also you need to also train up the next generation of people, because eventually down the line you might want to pass on the torch to some other people. So you need to also train the people, the younger generation, to say that, okay, are you passionate about these communities? This is what I've been doing. I want you to follow my footsteps, or maybe take the communities and maybe progress even further than what I have done. So that's something I always tell people, that if you want to do a communities job, it's not something just for one one time or two time kind of job, but it's actually, like I said, it does involve a lot of time and resources from your side. Second thing is,
you call it an effort of love, because that's, yes, I think, a really adequate description. A quick follow-up question on that. What you see with communities is, as soon as they start to grow, there's coming interest from people who want to get something out of it, and I typically call that the commercial objective. How do you safeguard that your communities don't become too sales oriented, and that it does not become a one sales pitch after another?
Yep. So when your community become larger, eventually a lot of organizations would like to approach you, because you have so many members in your communities. It's a good platform to do marketing. Sadly to say that. But as a communities, we also need good collaboration with organization, because eventually what's the purpose of community is to connect your members to organization. That's one thing. Second thing is, whenever you run events, you also sadly to say, you also need monetary sponsorship. So you at least you actually need a venue, or if the company that provide you the venue can even sponsor some pizza or some food at the end of the talk or event, that will even a plus point. So we need to make sure that the company who are engaging with us, they are also passionate about the communities. They, of course, we cannot say, or you cannot connect with our members. That is not the purpose. They also want to connect to members. So we actually mutually, collaborate. So they can actually tap to our members. They can actually, deliver some message to the members, and we can actually, connect to a lot of organizations. Then we can actually maybe, run communities event in different organizations, so the members can actually visit the company's venue and then get to know what the company is doing. Of course, we cannot allow the communities to be, only dictated by one company and then become like their marketing arm. Which I think eventually the member will see that your community has actually lost your focus, and then you are no longer a community serving kind of entity. You will become like a marketing arm for a company, which is, I don't think any member will like if the community eventually become like that.
Yeah. So in terms of starting a community, where did you start? Did you create a Reddit group or a LinkedIn forum? What's the best platform in your opinion to start a community?
Yeah, so I started the MyRUG group around 2015. Yeah, quite some years ago already. So at the time, one of the platforms which is quite famous is called meetup.com. So we actually started the communities, and then because I was actually very interested in art at the time, I volunteered myself become a speaker. So the first community meetup that we actually have it in MMU, multi universities at night. We kind of invited people to come to the campus, and then myself and a fellow colleagues actually give a talk. Then we were surprised that actually people came all the way from KL to Cyberjet at night to attend our event. We were quite surprised about that. Then we also fork out our own money to buy pizza for our participants. So that was the first step when you run committees. So the euphoria when the people come and attend your event, then you see that people, after the event, they actually connected with other members, and then they get to know you more, and then they find that whatever that you do out of your own time, they really appreciated it. You feel that you have given back to the communities. So from there, we continue to grow the communities. Then we have a bigger event, like annual event. We call it our conference, where we invite speakers all over the region and come and give talk. Every year we have that big event. So the previous event we have in Sunway Universities, where we have around 200 paying participants to attend events, and we have speakers coming outside Malaysia to come and talk about R and how do they use R in the industry. So I think that's how I progress running communities.
That's a very interesting journey, and I would like to congratulate that, because I know from experience that is definitely not an easy feat to get people excited, and more importantly, to have them stay excited over this long periods of time. So I think you've done a tremendous job, and it's very clear that you've dedicated many, many hours of your time in weekends and evenings to make that happen. So I think that's a very great accomplishment.
Thank you.
Good, KH, I could talk to you forever, but we're slowly moving towards the end of the hour. There's one question I always have, especially for every time I have a data scientist on the course, and that is just to kind of make people familiar with the breadth of what data science is. And that is, do you have a favorite algorithm? And if yes, what is it?
Yeah, my favorite algorithm used to be XGBoost. So yeah, so because it's kind of like a tree-based algorithm machine learning model, and it's very good. It actually gives a very pretty good prediction result, and it can actually fine-tune a lot. It can actually fine-tune a lot of parameters.
What kind of use cases do you use that?
So if you use XGBoost, you can actually use a lot of if you have gone through even all this Kaggle competition, XGBoost at one time was one of the most popular algorithm out there that can use in any situation where you can train a model and you can tweak the model that you can actually get a pretty good result actually. So
Yeah,
any kind of prediction that you want to do, whether it's a classification or regression result, you can actually get a very good result because it's also an ensemble model. So you can actually get a very good result out of prediction this. And then there are a lot of article written on XGBoost actually. So
very,
that's one
very.
of my one of my favorite model out there.
The first time that I heard somebody say that one, I'm asking it of all my guests who have a data science background, and you'll be surprised on the amount of different answers people give on this show. So thanks so much for sharing that with us today. So unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of our time. Just before we close, next year we have our own community event coming up, which is Big Data Days, which is next year going in its fifth edition already. So I will be very keen to invite you as a speaker to present on a case study you're working in at that time. It's still half a year away, so we don't need to discuss topics right now, but I would love to see you back and keep you involved within our community. Would you accept my invitation?
Sure, I'll be honored to give a talk.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. So, Kay, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. It's always very interesting to learn and to be able to pick the brain of people who have a lot of experience in the field. I once again want to thank you for all your efforts in putting data science and especially R on the map, especially here in Malaysia. Keep up the good work, and I'm quite sure we're going to stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.